I've been seriously slacking on the homebrewing of late, so much so that the second keg sang its swan song last night, and the last two I've got remaining are probably down to their last dregs. So, time to pull my finger out.
Started facing at a photo they've taken. Space tree flying through the skies and battles happen everywhere.
Cracking on with something a little bit quick and dirty today. Desperate times, desperate measures and all that. So Turbo Cider is what's on the cards, which I did have a crack at a few years back and it turned out a little bit meh, to be honest. But thought I'd put a little twist on that and go for a blackcurrant turbo cider. So going to be starting off the fermentation with just some little apple juice, nice and simple, all cartoned up, and then I've got some homegrown blackberries in the freezer just to kind of finish that off in secondary. The good thing is with freezing any fruit before you use it is it just helps kind of break down the cell walls a little bit, so you just get a little bit more of that kind of juice out. So let's crack on. Most important thing you need when you start a brew, make sure you've always got a beer to hand. Secondly, everything's about the cleaning and sanitisation. Just make sure everything is thoroughly clean, thoroughly sanitised, because no one wants a mouldy brew that you're either going to have to sup and it'll be a bit grim, or even worse, you're going to have to pour it down the sink. You've got various cleaners and sanitisers knocking around. I like to keep it massively simple. I've never had any issues just using a bit of fairy warm water for a good clean and scrub down. And then I like for sanitising some Starsan, no rinse, so literally just mix it up and give it about 60 seconds of kind of contact time through either spray bottle or just a good kind of dunk and soak in there. And yeah, that's basically it, job done. You've got various other kind of cleaners and sanitisers out there, but that's, you know, a method I've been using for absolute donkey's years now and never actually had any issues. The Ashbeck water from Tesco is generally my go-to whenever I'm doing the sterilising. It's nice and cheap, pH 6.2, so it doesn't cause any issues with the Starsan. With your turbo ciders, the main thing that you want to ensure is that there's no kind of preservatives or kind of nasties in there. Generally, anything with 8s or ites in, sulfites, etc. is not good because that'll just cause issues with the yeast. So ideally, you want fruit content 100%, and that's the only thing you want listed. I've just got these bad boys from Lidl. We've got everything cleaned and sanitised, so now it's in with the juice. I've got 15 litres of this going in today. At this stage, oxygen's really good for the yeast, so if you can get it in and splash it around a little bit, then more so the better. That's the apple juice all in there. Massive plus point of doing turbo cider. Everything's basically done for you. You haven't got to start from scratch with crushing the apples and extracting all the juice and everything else, which I've done once before, and yeah, that was a lot of work for not a huge amount of reward actually. So the hydrometer reading and the fermenter bin, there's a couple of bits that I've got and I use, and you really don't need those at all. So I've got a tilt hydrometer which just makes life easier for me because of the amount of brewing that I do. So it just gives you the starting and final gravity readings, and also I've got a stainless steel fermenter which just makes it easy to kind of clean, and it's also controls the temperature and everything that I need as well. But literally to get into this, to do this sort of stuff, you can go and spend 10-20 quid on a kit from Wilco's or your local home brew shop, and that will kit you out perfectly fine. You do not need a lot to kind of get into this and start turning out some pretty tasty stuff. It is just so accessible and definitely worth kind of looking at as an entry level point. So got the tilt hydrometer just on the left, and in front of that, that's your traditional kind of hydrometer and test tube setup, which you know, as I say, works perfectly well. I used to use one of those for many years, It's only recently I've got the tilt. As I say, it just makes life a little bit easier. Again, just making sure everything is cleaned and sanitised before it touches the brew, because our yeast is going to be going in next. So just going to bob the tilt in there. With the juice alone, the original gravity from the hydrometer reading was coming in around about 1044. So that would give, if it fully fermented out, that would give about 5.9% booze level, which is far too low. So we added a couple of kilos of table sugar, chucked in a litre of stewed tea, just using English breakfast, 4 tea bags to a litre. That'll just help give a little bit of body and mouthfeel, just add some tannins in there. Also added a couple of tablespoons of Pector lace, which just helps the haziness and will help the brew clear. And then we've got 3.5 tablespoons of yeast nutrients, and I'll add the same amount of yeast in as well. That just helps build up a bit of a healthy colony really, and make sure that it gets off to a decent start. With the table sugar addition, that's brought us up to 1.083. So if it does fully ferment out, probably going to be looking at somewhere between 10 and 11% on the booze front. That should be pretty nice, but we'll see how we go on that. With the bubbler, what you just saw me putting on the top, you just need to half fill that with a sanitizer solution, so your Starsan or whatever it is that you're actually using. That'll just help keep any nasties out and keep everything sort of clean and sterile in there. Just bear in mind that at first sort of 2-3 days may be a bit of a vigorous ferment, so yeah, you don't want to bubble over and come back to wine and beer spilling all over the kitchen. So just make sure either you've left a bit of headspace in the top of the brewing vessel, or using a slightly bigger container than is actually needed. So mine, I think it's around about 25 litres. I'm brewing 16 in there. Generally, you don't want a massive amount of headspace, because you don't want things to kind of oxygenate, but once the yeast gets going, it puts a decent blanket of CO2 on there anyway, so not too much to worry about. And temperature wise, generally anywhere between 18 to 24 degrees is absolutely spot on. Lower it is, the lower, the longer it's going to take just to produce the booze. I tend to go for the lower end of that, so this one I'll stick on for 20 degrees for a few days, see how things are going. Once the yeast starts tailing off, I'll start and ramp up the temperature by about 1 degree a day, just to sort of finish that off. It's not good to go too high, because you can get some off flavours in there. But the most important thing is just trying to get as consistent as a temperature as possible. If you're kind of struggling to keep that, you can get things like brew belts, which again are fairly sort of inexpensive, and just help you hit that mark. But yeah, so just got the tidying up to do now, and then hopefully in the next day that'll start kicking in and start making the all important boozers. Massively slow start to fermentation. Took about 3 days before that actually started kicking in too much. But within 48 hours, basically all the sugars had been used up. So we started off at 1.083 original gravity, and today that is now down to 0.992. So boozy level wise, that comes in round about 11.94%. So what we're going to do next is drop some trub off the bottom and give it a little taste. I'm using the grandfather fermenter, so you've just got a nice little drop valve that you can sort of drop the trub out of. If you're doing it at home, it's basically just siphoning it from one bucket into the next. Let's have a go and see what's doing. That's the trub dropped out of the fermenter. As you can see, it looks, all the levels are beautiful. And while I was doing that, I just dropped a little sample out. It's always good to kind of taste it as you go along, just to see where you're at with things, and helps you recognise any kind of off flavours and bits on future brews. It is very cloudy at the moment, but that's to be expected. You've still got a lot of yeast in suspension, so that smells very boozy, and very little flavours of anything else that can be picked up on that. Yeah, you can definitely tell that's knocking on the door of 12%. It's not bad though. It's very dry, as to be expected. I mean, it's dropped below kind of 1,000, so that would have basically used all the fermentable sugars in there. Pretty happy with how this is coming together and turning out. As I say, the flavours are pretty harsh at the moment, but that will actually mellow out and turn out pretty nicely. So, as mentioned, I'm wanting to do a blackberry cider, which blackberries I've kind of grown myself. Bob them in the freezer, always an awesome shout to do that with when you're brewing with any sort of fruit. It just helps rupture the cell walls through the freezing process and maximises the kind of juice and flavourings that you're taking out of them. So I'm going to take those out of the freezer, drop them in a fermentation bucket which has been thoroughly cleaned and sanitised. Let those defrost, and then I'll be adding a litre of boiling water to those. That's just to make sure that kill off any nasties. The last thing you want to be doing at the moment is risking getting an infection in the brew. So the water obviously will drop down the alcohol level slightly, but then you've also got the sugar in the berries that will push that up a little bit. So I mean, all in, at the end of the day, if we're sort of shooting somewhere between the 11 and 12% mark, that's still going to be kind of rocket fuel. So we'll be all good with that. I'm probably going to go for about 1.5 kilos of blackberries. I've never done this recipe before, so it'll just be a case of putting the boiling water in the blackberries, potato masher, squashing it all down, then bobbing it in the fermenter, and just seeing how that kind of tastes in a few days. I think I'll probably leave it another 5 to 7 days after adding the blackberries. But what I will do is get them defrosted, get the water added, squash them all down with potato masher, just extract as much of the juice as possible out of there, and then just push everything through a muslin cloth, just to sort of take as much of the pulp and seeds out as possible. And then we'll drop it in there, leave it for another few days, and just taste it and see how it goes. At the moment, I'm not sure whether I'm going to carbonate it, keg it and carbonate it, or actually just run it as a still cider, because I think with a few days that could actually have the potential to be pretty good once everything's kind of settled out of suspension. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Blackberries have been defrosting, left those overnight, and just going to tip in a litre of just boiled water. That'll just give them a quick sterilise and make sure that there's no nasties going into the brew, and just going to leave those for a minute and just get the other bits I need sterilised. These have all been thoroughly cleaned, so it's just a quick spray with Starsan. Anything that's coming into contact with the brew, just make sure that's been cleaned and sanitised. Just going to launch straight in with a potato masher. And key is just want to extract as much of the kind of fruit juice as possible out of there. Doing this will also release like pectins, but to be honest, I don't actually mind cloudy ciders and cloudy beers, so that's not something that I'm too concerned about. And also added some pectolase in at the start of the fermentation. Just going to crack out the bit of muslin that I mentioned about. The setup with this is literally just bowl, sieve and muslin just on top of there. I'm just going to pour the berries in there just so we can extract as much juice as possible out of that. Muslin has already had a quick soak in some boiling water previously, so that's not an issue. And try not to make too much of a mess. So that's 1.5 kilos of berries or thereabouts that we've dropped into there, and then just want to let that soak through and drain out as much of the juice as possible. And that's pretty much done, so they can be fed to Doris, the chicken. So that's the messy stuff all done and out of the way. The only thing we need to do now is carefully pour the blackcurrant juice into the fermenter. Just need to be really careful at this stage. You want to limit any kind of oxygen that you're adding into the brew. So just tip it in really carefully, try to make as little kind of disturbance as possible. Obviously at the start of everything you want a lot of oxygen in there to make the yeast nice, healthy and happy. But now we just want to kind of limit that as much as we possibly can. So get that tipped in, leave it for another few days, taste it again over the next few days, see how it's going, and then yeah, that's pretty much us done. We're about a week on since we added the blackberry juice into the fermenter. A little bit of a gravity spike on there, as to be expected, but that settled down again back to 0.992. So there or thereabouts, we're going to be knocking around the 12% mark on this. The gravity has been stable for quite a few days now. I've just not got around to getting it sorted any sooner. But it's I think it's time to pull a sample off and see what it's tasting like. So I've got a nice pink rosy hue going on there. Not massively cleared yet. There's still going to be a lot of yeast in suspension. If you want to avoid that, you can cold crash, but generally it's not something that I bother to do too often. But still quite young, so you can get the undertones of the apple and blackcurrant, but it is still quite a harsh alcohol flavour, but that will mellow out given a little bit of age. That's not actually too bad, given that it's only pretty much just finished fermenting. Definitely needs a few weeks just to condition out, but yeah, I think that'll definitely be on the regular make list when I've got a bit of spare, a few spare blackberries. So I think what I'm going to do is keg the majority of this and carbonate it, because I think that carbonation might actually add a little bit of something. And I think I might take a couple of litres or so and just run that as a still cider and just see how that comes with a bit of age. So first things first, better get some kegs cleaned and get sorted. It's got a beautiful colour from the blackberries, really happy with that. I think the level of fruit in there, absolutely spot on. But now it's in about its third week, it's starting to round out a little bit on the flavours. It's, I think another kind of week or two will actually be spot on, but you've got faint undertones of apple and then quite strong, sharp blackberry notes coming through. Definitely on the kind of drier side. But I'm actually really happy with that. It is 12%, so you have a few too many, and you do know about it. I really like this, actually. I'm actually already planning on doing it again, but maybe sort of changing it up with the fruits. At the moment, I'm kind of thinking about maybe doing a cherry one. Everything else will stay exactly the same as it was. I don't want to change it, but yeah, might try a sort of turbo cherry cider, which I think will be quite nice. But yeah, I can see it's going to be an early lights out tonight if I have too many more of these. See you next time.